to the House Doctor. Today I'm going to show you how to install an electric garage heater. The unit I'm going to show you how to install is a Doctor Heater DR966 electric infrared heater. I also decided to get the optional wall thermostat. You don't necessarily have to have this for this heater because it has a thermostat built in, but I wanted something that gives me a little bit more control and I don't have to reach up and get the knobs. We'll need a few electrical boxes. I have two different types here. I'll explain them as we go along. You're also going to need some type of way to protect the wires that come out of the wall or the ceiling that run to the unit. I decided to go with PVC flexible conduit. You can go with BX or some other type of way to protect the wires. You just can't leave the wires themselves exposed. First thing you're going to want to do is decide where you want to put your unit. I'm going to go somewhere up in this area. I'm going to take my handy magnetic stud finder and just run it along the wall and hopefully find a stud. There we go. And there's a drywall screw there, so I know I have a stud. So I'm going to put this bracket on the wall right here. You need to make sure wherever you put your unit that you're going to have at least a foot to either side of it of airspace around it because it does get pretty hot. So if I put it right here, the unit, I'm going to have plenty of room on each side. You're going to need something a little heavier than drywall screws or cabinet screws to hang this up. The unit's not that heavy, but you don't want something that's going to break. I'm going to go with these small lag screws. I'm going to pre-drill for my lag screws and bolt the bracket up. Next, we're going to take our loop bracket and mount it to the heater. I'm not mounting the unit permanently yet. I'm just setting it up here to get an idea of where I want my wires to come through. The connection's in the back on this side. I have my foot of clearance on this side and I have plenty of room on this side. And I have a foot of clearance from here to the ceiling, so this position's going to work out. I just drilled a hole up into the ceiling where I want to run the wires up into the attic that are going to come down to the heater, and I'm just going to shove a pencil in there, make it easier for me to find it when I get up there. Before I go upstairs and start running wires, I'm going to cut a hole for where I'm going to put the thermostat, and I'm going to put it right here. I know I have a stud here on this side of the breaker panel, so I'm going to go right here. This is the box that I'm going to be using today to mount the thermostat. It's a little different from other boxes that you use for doing old work because it has these drywall screws already part of the box that you run through at an angle and they screw into the stud. I'll put a link in the description below where you can pick this up, and as well as the heater and other things I'm using today, but these things are really easy to work with. When you're putting an outlet box into a wall like this that has fiberglass insulation, don't just reach in there and start ripping it out or take the box and shove it in there and smash the insulation. What that's going to do is compress the insulation and then leave an air pocket around it for cold air to travel. That's why sometimes outlets or switches in your house, you can feel the cold air coming through. Take a utility knife and just trim it up a little bit, just where you need the box to go. And then your box should be able to slide in without you feeling it pushing up against any of the insulation. I'm going to leave this out for now. I'll drill a hole from up top in the attic and we'll see how we can get the wires down here without making more of a mess. I also cut a hole right above the electrical panel so I can feed the power wires to the heater down to the electrical panel. There's no insulation here. That's just the way they decided to do it when they built the house. Now we're ready to go upstairs and start drilling some holes and feeding wire. I'm up in the attic now above the garage, and the pencil's sticking through right here, so this is where I'm going to run my wire from. Now I'm going to make the hole slightly larger. This is the wire I'm going to be using for the heater. This is pretty heavy gauge wire. This is 8 gauge wire, but you need something thick to power this heater that I picked because it's a 6,000 watt heater. Just make sure that you have the right size wire for the heater you're going to use. I'm going to feed down through the hole about how much wire I think I'm going to need to hook up to the heater, and then I'll run the rest of the roll over to where the breaker panel is. Now I'm in the attic above where the electrical panel is. You can tell this is where the electrical panel is. You have all these wires going down to it. This wire here is running to the heater. I need to run that down in this part of the wall so I can get to where we cut the hole for the outlet box. And then this wire is going to go to the electrical panel and over to the thermostat. To run the wires down to the electrical box, I'm going to use these fiberglass sticks. They're called fish sticks. I got these from Harbor Freight years ago. They still work great. It's just a little stick. They screw together. They're all about 3 feet long. I'm only going to need 2 of them. And I'll shove it down in the hole and hopefully be able to find it down in the garage. Now let me see if I can find this stick. Oh, got lucky, it's right here. Pull it out. Now back upstairs to connect the wires to this and pull them down. Oh. These fish sticks have a little hole in the end of it so you can stick the wire through, so it's easier if you just strip back the insulation a little bit. And then you can take one of the wires and stick it through the hole. That way you don't have to worry about it coming loose. This is the wire that I'm going to run from the breaker panel to the thermostat. And just in case I need to know for sure which one it is, because I haven't even looked at the instructions for the thermostat yet, I'm going to mark this with some red tape just so I know for sure which wire is going to the breaker panel. And now I'm going to just start feeding the wires down through the hole. All that's left is just take this wire, which we marked with red tape on one end, and feed it down to the breaker panel. There's no insulation in this part of the wall, so I'm not going to use fish sticks. I'm just going to shove it down. I should be able to grab the wire. Okay, I have all my wires run where I need them to go. This one is going to the breaker panel, coming over here with the red tape on it to our thermostat, and this wire runs all the way across the other side of the garage where I'm going to put the heater. I'm going to go back up in the attic, staple everything off, get the wires secured, and then I'll show you how to make the connections. This is the electrical box I'm going to use up on the ceiling where the wire comes out for the heater. I decided to use this because it's plastic and it's white. The white will match the walls, and since it's plastic, I don't have to worry about running a ground wire to it. Whenever you're running electrical, anytime you're going into an electrical box that's made out of metal, you need to ground it to the box. So I'm going to plug up the back of it because I'm not going to need that. On the top, I'm going to use one of these adapters and take one of these non-metallic clamps and screw it into there. That way I can run the wires in through here, clamp it nice and secure, and I don't have to worry about the wires being pulled out. On the bottom of it, I'm going to take my flexible conduit fitting and just screw that into the box. I'm not going to be making any connections inside this box, but I do need something to protect the wire when it comes out of the ceiling and runs down to the heater. So I'm really just using this as a transition from the wire that I have to the gray conduit. It's really not a good idea to have the sheathing on here when it's running through conduit. Just need to be careful when you're cutting this off that you don't nick the insulation on the wires that are inside of there. These little PEX cutters are great for cutting this flexible conduit. After I'm finished, I'll go up in the attic, put some fireproof caulk around that hole, just to make sure I don't have to worry about any issues with drafts or anything going up through there. I just need to take this little plate off the back of the heater. This is going to go on the end of that fitting where the conduit is. And these are the wires we're going to use to make the connection. You'll see these wires are labeled L1, L2, and this one has a funny symbol on it. That's for ground. So the green is going to connect to the bare wire. I'll put the black to the black and the red to the white. First, let me put this plate on the end of the conduit. Don't cut your wires off too short here. I'm going to make them about 3 inches. Should be good enough to make our connections since the wires from the heater come out of the box. I have all the connections made, black to black, red to white, and the bare wire to the ground. Now I just have to shove them in here and get that metal plate attached. I'm not going to be able to get you a shot of that because it's going to be back behind here up against the wall. Alright, the heater's all hooked up. Now we're going to take our smart box and just take a screwdriver and pry open the slots in the back where you're going to feed the wires through. For this thermostat, we need to make sure we know which wires are coming from the panel and which wires are going to the heater. So this wire here is going to the panel, so I'll remember which side of the box I feed it into. These wires are really heavy and thick. Avoid the temptation to cut them off too short. You need to have at least 6 inches from the back of the box and at least 3 inches sticking out so that if there's a problem down the road you can make your connections. Just don't cut them off too short. The ground wires don't get connected to the thermostat, and this is a plastic box, so I don't need to connect them to anything except each other. This is why it's important to read the instructions. This is a Dr. Heater DR001. The 2 red wires connect to the black and the white that are going to go to the panel, and the 2 black wires connect to the black and white that are going to the heater. So make sure you read your instructions whenever you're hooking up an electrical device. Once you make all your connections, you want to feed your wires carefully into the box. Don't force them. Bend them neatly. That's another benefit of this Dr. Heater thermostat. It's surface mount, so it doesn't go into the box at all. So all we have inside the box are the wires and the wire nuts. If you happen to live in one of those countries that use the strange numbers like Canada, there's a different dial here that has a C on it instead of an F if you want to switch that out. Last connection that we need to make is to hook our power wire into our breaker panel. Keep in mind when you take the cover off the panel, there's stuff in there that has electricity running through it all the time. You can easily touch it, so be careful. If you're skittish or unsure, don't do it. Get an electrician to hook up your heater for you. Once you have your cover off, this right here is the main breaker. Your panel might be the other way around with your main breaker at the top, but it'd be pretty obvious what it is. It has these big heavy wires running to it. Then you have 2 bolts or screws from your main breaker. Those have electricity to them, and they run all the way up behind all these other breakers to power these terminals back here. If you shut off your main breaker, there's still power on these 2 big heavy wires coming from your meter. There's no way to de-energize these without pulling the meter out of the socket on your house. So just be careful when you're feeding the wires through, because all of these screws here on the side of the breakers are energized. They have power. Be careful. Inside your panel, you're going to see these little circles. I'm going to knock one of those out. so I can feed the wire through. Now I'm going to take one of these clamps, feed it through, and put the nut on. When you're feeding this through, remember, some of this stuff has power to it, so make sure you keep control of these wires, they don't touch anything. Inside your panel, you're going to see a spot where you have a bunch of bare wires and white wires connected. That's your ground bar, or your ground bus, or your neutral bus. It can be called a lot of different things. This one has one on this side and on this side. If you're working in a sub panel, you need to keep your bare wires or your ground wires separate from the neutral wires. This is a main panel, so I don't have that issue. If you're not sure what the difference is between a sub panel and a main panel, you shouldn't be doing this kind of work. Anyway, this is a main panel, so the first thing I'm going to do is hook up the ground wire. And I have my wire all in place, and there's no empty spots. Do not loosen up the screw and put two wires in one spot. You can only have one wire in each spot, so I'm going to have to move this wire over to the other side and connect the ground over there. This is just one more reason why you don't want to cut your wires too short. On most circuit breakers, you're going to be able to use either a slotted screwdriver or a square drive screwdriver. Whenever I'm doing electrical work, I like to use a Klein screwdriver. This one is an 11-in-1. It has all different kinds of tips, and it has a square drive. It makes it much easier to tighten these up than messing around with a slotted screwdriver. All right, my two hot wires are going to go to a breaker that I'm going to put right here, but I'm not going to cut the wires off right at that length. I'm going to leave them go long a little bit and bring it back up around, just in case get a bad connection somewhere down the road, you have a little bit of wire left over to make a fix to the connection. I like to make my connections to the breaker before I put it on the panel. Just makes it a little bit easier to work with the wires. Get your wires bent where they need to go. There's a hook on the back of the breaker that hooks around this steel back here, and then these terminals push onto the bar. Now all of our connections are made. I'm going to set our thermostat to the off position and set the heater to the off position, then we'll turn on the breaker and check everything out. Alright, first test, let's turn the breaker on. Didn't trip, that's good. Now I'll turn the thermostat up, put it on 70 for now. Now let's go try out the heater. Okay, the heater that I picked has a thermostat built in, so I'm going to turn that up and it should kick on. It's blowing air, but I don't feel any heat yet. Let's give it a minute. Got a light on, that looks good. A little warm. This also has two stages, 3,000 or 6,000. Let's see what happens when I go to high. Okay, now I can definitely feel the heat. Probably going to take a little bit for those coils to heat up. Let it run for a minute and see what happens. I let it run for a few minutes. It's doing a great job. It's already starting to take the chill off. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It helps you and me. It helps you because YouTube will keep recommending videos like this to you that you like, and it helps me by letting me know I'm doing a good job, and it also get my video recommended to other people who watch. Thanks for watching.